Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Altmetric webinar, Tracking Research Commercialization with Altmetric. My name is Stacy Conkiel. I'm the Director of Research and Education at Altmetric, and I'm going to be mostly the host for today's webinar, although I'll do some talking as well. We're going to hear about the nuts and bolts of our newest data source, patent citations, that is, citations to research from patents. We're going to hear about this from our customer support manager, Amy Rees, who's really been part of the driving force on the product side in terms of getting patent data into Altmetric. And we're really, really excited about this new data source, so we're happy you could be here with us today. Before we get started, some brief housekeeping. This webinar will be recorded, and the slides and recording will be made available after the webinar. If you have questions throughout our presentation today, and by the way, it should be a short one. We left some extra time in terms of the GoToWebinar scheduling in case we run over, but we're planning on about half an hour total today, including questions and answers. But if you have questions throughout the webinar, please enter them in the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. I'll be managing those and divvying them up in the Q&A section appropriately. And finally, let us know if you cannot hear or see us. We should be good to go, but I will be watching the chat box in case any issues arise, so please just type a message to me in the chat box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So without any further ado, I think I'm going to hand it over to Amy.
Great, thanks so much, Stacy, for getting us started. Just so that we're not amorphous voices in the ether, this is Stacy and I. So today we are going to work through just a little brief overview of what Altmetrics are, do an introduction to patent data, talk about where you can see patent data in the Altmetric products, and as Stacy said before, she's going to talk a little bit about use cases. And at the end, we can work through any questions you have dropped in the chat box. Just as a starter, what are Altmetrics? Altmetrics are non-traditional attention to academic publications. So these are pieces of attention that we can capture online. For example, news stories that reference publications, policy documents, and then, of course, social media like Twitter and Facebook. Altmetrics should be viewed as immediate and longitudinal, and they should complement traditional metrics. So traditional metrics, you would see those more as academic citations. Altmetrics are sort of focused to see the broader range of impact and attention associated with your publication. And that's one of the reasons that patent data is such an exciting source. It's a new piece of the Altmetrics puzzle. It gives you a little bit more of the rest of the universe of how publications are being used. So just some language so that everything's clear while we work through. I'm going to be using the terms outputs, sources, and mentions. So an output is a publication. So that's a journal article, a book, a data set, any of these publications, as it were. An attention source is where we capture a story from or a piece of attention from. So for example, the World Health Organization publishes policy documents. An Altmetric mention is a reference within that source. So for example, a World Health Organization policy document that has like a citation in it. In this example, a journal article is published. The WHO publishes a policy document that links to that journal article. That all comes together in Altmetric. Introduction to patent data. So what are patents? Patents are a type of intellectual property that provide either the original inventor or the holder with specific legal license to use and produce a certain type of content. So if you invent something or you add in addition to a different type of invention or product, you can register this idea, and in exchange for disclosing the specifics of your idea or concept, you are then afforded the legal access to monetize that. Patents are, of course, different by jurisdiction. So there is the World Intellectual Property Organization, and that does cover quite a top level, but there are also individual jurisdictions. So for example, there is a US Patent Office, there is a Great Britain Patent Office, and there is a European Patent Office. Altmetric has pulled data from 9 different patent jurisdictions. So where does Altmetric patent data come from? Our data comes from IFI claims, which aggregates more than 100 million patents from across the world. We are currently using their data within the Explorer. So just some numbers on our patent coverage. More than 779,000 patents are in our database that reference publications. So just a quick clarification. I know Stacy touched on this previously. I just wanted to say again, there's quite a lot of terminology around patents, but what we're tracking is a reference to an academic publication in a patent. So when you publish a patent, you have a list of references, and one of them could be a journal article, or one of them could be a data set or a book. So that's what we're looking at. So within the Altmetric database, more than 779,000 patents are in there and have referenced publications. More than 15,000 books have been referenced. And there are more than 3.9 thousand mentions of clinical trials, 760,000 academic papers, 255 mentions of great literature. So all of this is the big numbers. And as I said before, there are 9 jurisdictions that are covered in our data. How does our data capture work for patents? IFI, as previously mentioned, they send us the patent information. Then our scraper looks for URLs, DOIs, and PubMed IDs. So we go through the patent and we look for things that are interesting. We know, oh, this URL goes to nature.com and is a journal article. Great, we'll extract that. And then we link it to that actual journal page. So we know that this is one publication with one or more identifiers. And then it appears on the details page. We currently support DOIs as well as whitelisted URLs. So whitelisted URLs are things like links to PubMed, links to journals, or journal articles, links to repositories, to books. So these are links to websites that we track. You can see from this reference extraction where the DOI is. So this is an example of a reference we've extracted from a patent. So where can you see patent data in Altmetric? The first place is our details pages. So you can see here on our details page, there is the orange, which is our official patent color, source of much debate in the office. You can see here that it's mentioned by 2 patents. And then if you click on the patent tab, you can see the title of the patent, the grant number, the location, and jurisdiction where it was registered. So this is the Intellectual Property Office of Australia, and when it was granted, so July 2010. And if you click through, you can see the original patent. Oh, gosh. And again, this is the patent we were just looking at. This data is also available in the Explorer. You can see it in all the places you would expect to see other data. So you can see it as a sorting filter, in the results analysis, as well as in the mentions tab. So we'll just have a look now and see some examples so that we can work through what patents look like in the Explorer. So for ease, I think we're going to do, just get ourselves a subset. So we'll look at the keyword CRISPR. There's quite a lot of research about CRISPR right now. So you can see we've done a keyword search, and this is all the publications that are related to that particular keyword. You can then use our sort by filter. The default is always the Altmetric attention score, high to low. But you can now search by patents. So you can see, oh, this top level, while it doesn't have the highest Altmetric attention score, has the highest number of patents. So that way you can scroll through if you're interested in seeing which publications have the most patents. You can then analyze these results. So you click through, and you can see of our data set of CRISPR, there are 1,803 patents that reference those publications. You can decide to just look at it like this. If you want to get rid of the other data and just focus on patents, and you can also specify your timeline. So maybe I'm only interested in this length of time, September 2016 to April 2018, maybe only the last 6 months, 3 months, etc. If you'd like to look at the specific mentions or a specific time period, you can navigate to the Mentions tab. Apologies for the wait. There we go. And once you're in the Mentions tab, which provides you with the ability to search by time period or specific mentions, you can then look at only one type of source. So we could decide we just want to see the patent data associated with these publications. And this will pull up all of the patents that have been referenced in the publications we previously looked for using the keyword CRISPR. And this will let us look at them individually, and we can click through, and that way we can scroll through the most recent ones or filter by time. My apologies, I am not somewhere that apparently has great internet. Sorry about that, everyone.
The dangers of live demos. Perhaps maybe let's just move on to our next slide, Amy, because I worry that we might end up trying to reload today.
So another place you can see this data is the Altmetric API, or various of our APIs, and this is how it's surfaced. So this is the machine readable way of seeing our patents. This particular example has the title, the URL. So as I showed previously, the actual patent is hosted on Dimensions. You can see that's the URL to Dimensions. The license is public, and these are the citations, when it was approved, as well as a summary, jurisdiction, filing, application. So we do have this data also in a machine readable way in our APIs. Stacy, did you want to take over?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm just going to briefly talk you through a number of use cases so you can kind of start to imagine how this data might be used depending on your particular context, whether you work at an institution or work for a publisher, maybe you work for a pharmaceutical company. We're going to just walk through very briefly some basic use cases. And these are all based around one particular scenario. If you could advance, Amy, please. So we're going to look at 5 perspectives on one study. And that is a study that has been a long study over many, many years done by Dr. Turner here, who has developed a new malaria vaccine that's gone on to be patented both by her, and then related technologies that cite Dr. Turner's research have gone on to patent other aspects of malaria research technologies and so on. So the first example is Dr. Turner's institution. A lot of institutions want to understand how is the research that we support by virtue of putting a roof over our researchers' heads or helping people to get grants, how is that research making a difference in the world? So a lot of institutions develop impact case studies for evaluation scenarios like the Research Excellence Framework in the UK, the RAE, which is a similar national assessment exercise coming up in Hong Kong. And what impact case studies are they're basically reports that institutions write about particular studies done at their university that have made a difference in the so-called real world, right? So the institution, Dr. Turner's institution, might use this information about the patents that have cited Dr. Turner's research to show that, look, she's not only publishing about this particular topic, but she's also developing technology that has gone on to be implemented in the real world. And thanks to that, countless lives were saved. So in addition to institutions, there are funders, right, who give money to researchers like Dr. Turner, and they want to understand the so-called return on investment for the grant dollars that they disperse. It used to be, until very, very recently, that the way to understand impact was kind of a black box. You couldn't see all the constituent parts. You could track citations to understand disciplinary impact, but you didn't necessarily know about the knowledge diffusion, how people were talking about research in the real world. You can do that now by looking at social media, for example, to understand the discussion around research. You can understand uptake in policy by looking at policy citations. And you can also look at patents, obviously, to understand the commercialization of research. So in this event, a foundation that funds Dr. Turner's research might look at, in addition to the countless lives saved, which is arguably the most important metric, they wanted to understand other aspects of the impact of this study that they've funded. They can look and see, okay, what's the economic development that's kind of grown up around this particular study? Thanks to a patented technology, vaccines are developed and then they're produced, which go on to mean that there's money invested in the local economies. It's one example of a way that you can understand other aspects of impact looking at patent data. And on the flip side of that coin, there are businesses who often also fund independent researchers who might want to understand what's the impact of a clinical trial that they fund. And they want to know this on the R&D side to help understand the potential for revenue, but they're also very interested in the larger field of commercialization of technologies around a piece of research. So funders and businesses both often require that the people that they fund submit reports showcasing all the publications that have come out of something that they funded. A business might track the patent citations to those publications in order to understand the entire market size, potential market size, and also find opportunities for patents that they might purchase down the line to help bring products to market and so on. Beyond businesses and funders and institutions, there are the researchers themselves, right? Who often can use this type of data for various professional advancement scenarios. One example of that might be to craft compelling narratives when writing grants, when going up for tenure, when applying for jobs. Having this type of information, the citations in patents that are based on your research, can be a really nice pearl that you stick into a narrative that you're writing in any of these scenarios to help explain the broader impacts of your research, so to speak. So again, kind of like the institutional scenario, right? We're less interested in the fact that patents are there, that research has been commercialized, than the fact that patents have shown that a piece of research has made it into the real world. It's been developed and gone on to be produced, and by virtue of being produced and being out in the real world, it's been administered to many, many children worldwide, and so on. That's an example of the type of narrative that a researcher like Dr. Turner could craft around patent citations. And then finally, there are the publishers, the people and organizations that make it possible for this research, Dr. Turner's research, to get out into the world. They publish the journals and the books that Dr. Turner and researchers like her write that help communicate knowledge to the discipline and to the broader world. And so publishers, they might want to add value for people who are reading their research, but then also the authors that they want to draw in to publish in their journals or publish on in their monograph series and so on. So they can do things like create thematic collections around innovative research that's been commercialized by looking at patent citations in the area of immunology, or more specifically, malaria vaccine development. They can create these thematic collections in order to repurpose content to bring interest and light to maybe older publications that people wouldn't be reading if they didn't know that, if they weren't interested in the commercialization of particular aspects of immunology research. They can also showcase their value to researchers, to the authors publishing or potentially publishing in their publications by showcasing, look, we published your journal article, we published your book, and we've helped get it into the hands of industry who have gone on to commercialize this research and bring it to market and so on. So to the right is an example of a narrative, a bit of marketing or an email that a publisher might send to readers or to prospective authors in order to showcase the unique value that their publications have brought to researchers and authors themselves. So with that, let's move on to our final segment, what is next for patents information and patent citations in Altmetric. So first of all, we are going to, in the next few months, start adding patents that were filed prior to 1994. We've got a really great batch of patents right now that are published from 1994 onwards, and we're going to start backfilling those, so to speak, by adding older patents, and that will also help showcase older referenced research. So older publications that have been referenced in patents will start to appear more and more in these patent filings once we backdate all those patents. And then finally, we're going to also improve our means of reference extraction. So Amy was explaining that currently we look for certain persistent identifiers in references sections of patents. We look for DOIs, we look for PubMed IDs in order to say, this string of text right here is a publication. Let's take this publication and match it with publications in our database in order to create those nice, pretty Altmetric details pages and reports that collate all the Altmetric attention in one page, right? So what we're going to begin doing is text mining, which will basically look for things like article titles, book titles, author names, and other sorts of recognizable information, and we will match text that we find in patents to text that's in our database to say, okay, this thing, even though it doesn't have a DOI, is definitely a monograph. Let's file this bit of patent citation away in the attention that we already have, similar to how we're doing for patent citations that have identifiers. So with that, we can now take a break for questions. If you just want to advance one more slide, Amy, I will say that we want to say thank you to all who've made time to attend this morning. If you'd like some more general information, you're welcome to visit help.altmetric.com at any time in the future. You can also email us for more information at info@altmetric.com. But we are here and at your service to answer any questions that you might have. So let's see where my questions panel went. Ooh, here we go. All right. So we've got a question, Amy, from Larry Anderson, who asks, is the data based only on non-patent publications? That is, not based on other cited patents, but only references to research articles and so on.
I'm sorry, Stacy, I think you dropped out for the first part of your question.
Oh, apologies. So we've got a question from Larry who asks, is the data based only on non-patent publications, that is research articles and research outputs that are not patents that are cited in patents, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's correct. So we are extracting specific academic references within patents as opposed to patent references in patents, if that makes sense. So we are only extracting references to scholarly publications.
Cool. So here's a really great question from David, and I'm going to punt this one over to you, Amy, because you have much more intimate knowledge of our patent data than I do in some ways. So David asks, are you distinguishing between patent applications and granted patents? Also, how are patents filed in multiple jurisdictions or patent families counted? Are they counted as a single citation or as multiple citations?
These are fantastic questions. I really like these. So if you go to the details page, you can see that we do actually surface the status where we can. Otherwise, you have to link through and look at the original patent. So where possible and where we have the data, it'll be on the details page, but it should always be in the original patent. The second question about jurisdictions, also a great one. So we don't use patent families as a way of grouping data, as patent families vary slightly to significantly based on the jurisdiction. So some group patent families a certain way and some use them a different way. So we haven't used that as we couldn't see a consistent hierarchy. That said, we do capture patents in each different jurisdiction. We count those as their own individual citations because it was applied for and granted or not granted in both areas. While largely you do see that something granted in the States will be granted in the UK, that's actually not always true. So it's good. We like to surface these as independent things because they do follow different processes.
Excellent. So we have another question, this time from Katie, who asks, am I able to access this information without an Altmetric Explorer subscription? Is it possible to search for this information? And this is definitely one that I can take. It is possible to access the patent information through details pages like Amy shows here. You will be able to, for example, use the Altmetric bookmarklet to look up articles to see the Altmetric details pages for those articles where we have attention to those articles in our database. You can see that and you can find patent mentions if they are available. That said, subscription to Altmetric Explorer will allow you to do all the really cool stuff that Amy showcased, searching patents across multiple time periods, doing things like sorting by patent information, looking at all the 9 million plus articles we have in our database overall, and then finding those roughly 800,000 with patent data attached. So yes, so that the answer to the question is it depends. It depends on kind of how your point of entry into the information. So if you'd prefer to look up patent information for a particular article, that is possible to do without a subscription. But to do the really cool stuff, the visualizations and the searching across our full database, you do need a subscription to Altmetric Explorer. Amy, another question for you. Do you have a way to select patents by funding source?
So we don't currently support that, but that is something we are looking to provide in the future. So that data isn't currently available in the Explorer.
All right, cool. And then another question, this time from Colleen. Do you need a subscription to Dimensions to use the link that's available in the details page?
So for the time being, you do need to log in to get access to these. but Dimensions is working on making that available. So in the next few weeks, they will make their patent pages live and available for free to everyone. It's just a matter of them finishing that project on their side.
All right, excellent. Thank you all so much. We have hit time for today's webinar. If you have any additional questions, I know there were a few we weren't able to get to this morning, but you can go ahead and email us at info@altmetric.com, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you do have. Thanks again for your attendance, and we hope to see you online soon.